Hi there, I'm Lorene. I spent 23 years building the backbone of a company, only to be erased from it overnight. They called me a legacy burden, rewrote my code, and replaced my name with theirs. But what stings more? They smiled while doing it. And they weren't strangers. They were colleagues I once mentored, friends I trusted. Why would they turn on me like that? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you helped succeed? Or watched loyalty get punished instead of rewarded? What time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I'd really love to know. The elevator ride up to the 28th floor felt longer than usual. No music, just the low hum of motion and the sterile glow of the overhead lights. When the doors slid open, I stepped out, heels clicking against the polished tile, into a silence too practiced to be casual. I hadn't been officially invited to the morning strategy meeting, but a vague nudge from Blair the night before, "You might want to be there," had been enough to stir my instincts. And now, as I pushed through the glass doors into the boardroom, that feeling curdled. Eyes flicked toward me and then away. Rhett sat at the head of the table, fingers laced like he owned the oxygen in the room. Noelle offered a tight smile before quickly looking back at her tablet. Blair didn't even acknowledge me. I sat down, spine straight, chin up. Something was wrong. Not loud wrong, quiet, deliberate wrong, the kind that creeps up your back like cold breath. Rhett stood. "As of this morning, Dalka is pivoting to a more agile innovation model," he began, voice lacquered in rehearsed enthusiasm. "We've realigned leadership to reflect that." Blair tapped her screen, and a new org chart lit up the screen behind him. My name wasn't on it. "We're streamlining," he said, eyes meeting mine like a dare. "Some legacy roles no longer align with our future." Legacy roles. That's what I was now. A leftover. A footnote. Richard from HR shifted in his seat, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Noelle's knuckles whitened on her stylus. Blair, once my closest collaborator, watched the screen like it was a soap opera she'd already seen the ending of. I forced a smile. It cracked at the edges. "I see," I said. Rhett leaned forward. "You've been instrumental, Lorene, but we're moving in a different direction. Instrumental, like a wrench. Useful, then discarded." "I understand," I said, though my voice had dropped an octave, cooler than I expected. "I assume this direction doesn't include access to my team or ongoing projects?" Rhett hesitated. Blair answered for him. "Number effective immediately." The word effective echoed. A blade, not a formality. And then Rhett said it. "Residual overhead," he muttered, to no one in particular. It landed like a slap. Residual. Overhead. I didn't flinch, didn't break. I stood, gathered my things with the precision of ritual, and met each of their eyes, even Blair's. "Duly noted," I said. "Best of luck." And I walked out, but what none of them knew was what I'd already done the night before. Back home, the quiet hit like static. I tossed my bag on the counter and went straight to my laptop. My fingers moved by habit. Login, system access, team archives, locked. My cloud credentials, expired. Company portal, blocked. Email, blank screen. It was like I'd never existed. I checked again. Still nothing. All of it, years of research, communications, IP, vanished, sanitized. But they'd made one mistake. They didn't know about the off-grid mirror I'd kept. Not for revenge, for insurance. I whispered to no one. Amateurs. I opened my private server. My work, my real work, was still there, humming quietly like a sleeping dragon. They thought they could delete me, but I had already started writing the next chapter, on my own terms. The apartment lights flickered as I dropped my coat onto the back of the couch. My heels echoed one last time on the hardwood before I kicked them off and sank into the silence. It wasn't peace. It was the hollow kind, like walking through an abandoned house you once called home. I reached for the wine bottle I hadn't touched in weeks. Tonight called for red. Something dark enough to match the taste in my mouth. My laptop chimed. A single email notification. From Noelle. Subject line, Strategic staffing discussion, internal only. At first, I thought she'd sent it by accident. Maybe muscle memory betrayed her. But the pit in my stomach said otherwise. I clicked it open. My name stared back at me, bolded, under a section titled, Retire Ready Risks. I stopped breathing. The thread dated back 3 months. Conversations between Kevin, Rhett, Blair. My name mentioned 5 times. Phrases like succession grooming complete, high cost retention, and worst, mentorship concluded. They hadn't just fired me, they'd been preparing my execution. The betrayal tasted metallic. I scrolled through the rest, scanning words but absorbing only venom. Then I hit print. The hum of the printer filled the room like a ticking bomb. Kevin's name floated past again. He used to shadow me during onboarding. 8 years ago, he didn't know the difference between a hotfix and a rollback. I taught him how to push code without crashing the build, and now he called me a legacy burden. I muttered, they planned this while I was still wiping their training wheels. The attachments loaded slowly. One spreadsheet. No subject, no context, just raw numbers. It was titled Senior Efficiency Model. I opened it. There we were, 7 names, mine at the top, all of us over 45. Notes beside each name like tally marks in a war room. Replaceable. No succession risk. Phased mentorship complete. I wasn't a person to them anymore. I was a line item, a cost-saving measure. The wine glass trembled in my hand. I stared at my reflection in the darkened screen, half lit, half erased. I'd spent 23 years building this company's infrastructure. Missed birthdays, skipped holidays, took calls at 2 a.m. to clean up code I didn't break. I held this house together with duct tape and firewalls, and now I was just a cell in a spreadsheet. I whispered, "You don't get to write the last line." I grabbed my phone and sent one message to Miles. They confirmed everything. I have the files. Then I opened the folder buried beneath 3 layers of encrypted security. Spectra, private dev logs. The interface loaded slowly, familiar, intimate, mine. My thumb hovered over the launch icon. They wanted silence, erasure, a clean break. But ghosts don't vanish, they haunt. If they want to erase me quietly, they'll have to be louder than the storm I'm about to bring. By morning, the storm outside had quieted, but inside me, it had only begun to gather. The air smelled like stale ambition and betrayal. My coffee tasted like burnt trust. I stared at the monitor. The Spectra logs blinked back, lines of my code, untouched, still breathing. They hadn't found it. They didn't even know what they were looking for. At 10:47 a.m., a text from Miles lit up my screen. Warehouse 6 tonight, 8 sharp. Bring only the files. Miles didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He was the one person who'd seen me rebuild a server from ash when we lost everything during the Great Blackout of 2015. He knew I didn't scare easy. Still, I took a breath. Then I walked back into Dalka. The office looked the same. Sterile, buzzing with quiet urgency. No one made eye contact as I passed. Cowards wear the same perfume. Silence. At my old desk, my nameplate was gone. A junior associate now sat there, 22 maybe. Her desktop was plastered in pink sticky notes like training wheels. I kept walking. Noelle spotted me near the elevators. Her face went pale. Then she smiled like nothing had happened. "Lorene, I thought, you forwarded the wrong email," I said. Her throat bobbed. "I didn't mean..." "I know. That's what makes it so valuable." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I leaned in. "They'll make you the next risk factor if you blink wrong. Be careful, Noelle." She said nothing. I left her with that silence. By 3 p.m., I was back home, unpacking the Spectra code. It wasn't just a prototype. It was the future they wanted to sell under Blair's name. A neural infrastructure optimization engine. My engine. And I had the only working build. 16 years ago, I'd started it in secret after seeing the inefficiencies in our backbone system. I named it Spectra, After the rainbow my daughter drew the day I pulled my first all-nighter, the file still had her initials in the metadata. I stared at the line of code I'd written that night. // Spectra learns. By watching humans fail. I laughed. It sounded colder than I expected. That evening, Warehouse 6 was soaked in low amber light and the faint buzz of electricity. Miles waited beside an old server rack, hands in his jacket, gaze locked on mine. I brought everything, I said. He nodded. We'll ghost it. VPN hop. No trace. I slid the drive into the port. The hum of the fan kicked on like a heartbeat. They'll know, I said. Eventually. By then, Miles replied, we'll be 2 steps ahead. I watched the screen come alive, lines of code cascading like rain on glass. You sure you want this? He asked. I thought about Kevin's smirk, Blair's silence, Rhett's dismissal, the spreadsheet. I'm not looking for revenge, I said. I'm building my exit wound. He looked at me for a beat too long. That's the most Laureen thing you've ever said. We didn't speak again. As I shut down the server, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. We're watching. I smiled. Good. The call came at 2:14 a.m. I didn't hesitate. I picked it up before the second ring. They're in, Miles whispered. Someone tried pulling from your dev chain. My breath caught. From Dalka? Corporate credentials. IP resolves to headquarters. They're copying, Laureen. I didn't answer. I was already out of bed, racing toward my home office. The server room hummed as I logged in, fingers shaking but precise. And there it was, an unauthorized download attempt, flagged under elevated clearance. My clearance. They used my name, a string of code, a mirror session, a corrupted checksum. They're not just copying, I said aloud. They're laying groundwork to steal the whole thing. I scanned the logs, then froze. Blair's admin ID, attached to a download batch of Spectra's Alpha Core, and worse, a linked document, patent draft, Rhett listed as the lead innovator, Blair as co-author. I stared at the screen. The audacity of it wasn't shocking. It was predictable. You're signing things you can't even spell, Rhett. I exported the logs, encrypted the entire chain, and saved a duplicate to cold storage. Sleep didn't come. By sunrise, I was running diagnostics. Miles messaged again. They altered your metadata. Rhett's name now shows as Spectra's origin point. They weren't just erasing me, they were rewriting me out of my own legacy. Gaslighting in source control. I ran comparisons, line by line, timestamp by timestamp. Their version didn't have the predictive feedback layer, didn't even include the adaptive conflict resolution loop. It was like watching a thief forge a painting but forget the brushstrokes. I backed up every untouched version, 3 drives, 3 locations. No cloud, no chance of accidental deletion. I poured black coffee like armor and called Brenda, my lawyer. We may have a war coming, I said. I have proof of forgery, metadata tampering, and IP theft, and I know who did it. Brenda's voice was calm steel. Start compiling. I'll prep a pre-injunction draft. We won't let them launch anything until we drag it through discovery. By evening, I sat back down to revisit the patent file they tried submitting under Rhett's name. He'd included a methodology section. At the bottom, a critical method was labeled Initiate Specterm Loop. Specterm. With a U. He couldn't even spell spectrum. My lips curled. I took a screenshot, dragged it into the evidence folder, and whispered, "Thanks for making it easy." I opened a new window, typed out the subject line. Formal IP counterclaim. Spectra ownership. They forged my name out of the system, but they left fingerprints all over the crime scene. I waited by the concrete pillar, shadows stretching long under the pale glow of fluorescent lights. The garage reeked of oil and ego. Rhett's silver SUV rolled in, right on time. He always parked in the same spot, always admired his own reflection in the side mirror before stepping out. Today I beat him to the mirror. His keys jangled as he approached, stopping short when he saw me. Well, well, if it isn't the ghost of Q3 past. I didn't move. You need to stop. He laughed, sharp and performative. Stop what? Moving the company forward? I stepped closer, calm. Forgery, IP theft, metadata tampering, filing patents you didn't write and can't spell. He tilted his head. You sound bitter and irrelevant. I handed him the sealed envelope. Legal letterhead peeked through the translucent edge. His fingers twitched as he opened it. Eyes scanned fast, then slower. The smugness cracked. This is cute, he muttered. Your lawyer thinks you own code built under our roof? No, I said. I own what I built on my own servers, on my own time, with my own architecture. You just tried to slap your name on it. His jaw clenched. You're bluffing. Am I? I nodded toward the camera dome blinking in the corner. You're on record threatening legal action over IP that isn't yours. I wonder what the judge will say. His voice dropped, low and venomous. You'll regret this. I'll bury you before I let that tech walk. My hand slid casually into my coat pocket, tapping the phone already recording. Thanks, I said. That's all I needed. I turned without another word, the sound of my boots echoing behind me. Each step tighter than the last, but I didn't let it show. Inside, adrenaline screamed. Outside, I was stone. By the time I reached my apartment, I was already uploading the file. Subject line, insurance. Brenda replied within 5 minutes. Got it. He just handed you the entire pretrial narrative. I poured tea, no wine tonight, and opened the encrypted group thread labeled Rising Team. They were waiting. Engineers, analysts, people they'd discarded before me, names they'd forgotten, stories they thought they erased. My message was simple. This weekend, we move. He called it a bluff. On Monday, he'll call it a mistake. My phone buzzed before my eyes even opened. Notifications spilled across the screen like a digital avalanche, subject line after subject line shouting the same thing. A threat to Dalka's integrity. I sat up, heart still slow, mind sharpening. The sender? Blair. Her memo, sent to every corner of Dalka's internal network, framed me as the villain. Recent revelations suggest former director Lorene Blackwood may have shared proprietary architecture with an overseas firm currently under review by federal compliance. I reread it. Again. So now I was a traitor. I stood slowly, walked to the kitchen, and poured coffee that suddenly tasted bitter. My hand trembled once, then steadied. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. It only took an hour for the leaks to start. A LinkedIn post. Anonymous. Former Dalka exec under espionage investigation. Attached were screenshots of the memo, of course, carefully cropped. My inbox lit up. Old coworkers, former mentees, even clients. Some messages thinly veiled accusations, others danced around support, but none of them knew the whole picture. I didn't answer. I watched. Then, at 1:14 p.m., a message slid in from an old dev team lead. A Slack transcript. It was Blair. An HR plotting. This narrative protects us from any pushback if she tries to claim code authorship. She has no legal ground without dev access. We scrubbed her out. They weren't just throwing me under the bus. They were paving the road. I exhaled slowly. Not rage, not panic. Just cold focus. The pieces moved into place faster than expected. At 3:47 p.m., Miles texted, FYI, Blair's husband is on Vestron's board. I stared at the message, mouth curving into something between disbelief and satisfaction. Vestron, Dalka's top competitor. And she accused me of betrayal? I opened my portfolio analysis app, scanned recent stock activity. Blair had quietly dumped over $200,000 in Dalka shares, right before the Spectra metadata was reassigned. Patterns don't lie, people do. I toggled open a new file, pulled in every screenshot, every trade record, the Slack leaks, IP logs, the patent timestamp from Rhett's forgery. I labeled the folder, Glass House. By dusk, the sun had dipped behind the skyline. My apartment dimmed, but my screen glowed brighter than ever. I composed a message, anonymous, encrypted. To federal.ethics.whistle@fcc.gov. Subject, Dalka insider conflict of interest. Formal whistleblower submission attachments, 14. But I didn't click send. Not yet. Timing matters more than truth in this war. Monday, I whispered to the silence. You'll learn what silence sounds like when it screams. They want a scandal? Let's give them one with receipts. I stepped into the boardroom like I owned it. Not because I did, but because they had forgotten I helped build every inch of the foundation they now stood on. My heels clicked sharp across the marble, cutting through their laughter and side talk like gunfire. Silence hit hard and fast. Blair stiffened in her seat. Rhett glanced at me and visibly swallowed. I wasn't on the invite list, I said, setting my leather bag on the edge of the table. But I figured if you're going to accuse me of betrayal, I might as well show you what the real thing looks like. I connected my laptop to the projector. The screen blinked once, then bathed the room in cold light. The first slide was a company org chart, but not Dalka's, Vestron's. Let's talk conflict of interest, I said, my voice smooth, razor-lined. Your chief strategy officer is married to a board member of Dalka's largest competitor. And coincidentally, our IP, my IP, started leaking 2 months after their anniversary dinner. Someone in the back coughed. Legal counsel whispered something to the chair. Blair's jaw clenched. I clicked again. Brokerage data. SEC filings. A timeline of her stock trades. Screenshots of internal emails. Phrases like, bury it before she resurfaces, and divert attention from internal risk. Her chair squeaked as she shifted. This is manufactured, she snapped. None of that proves anything. Of course, I said, nodding. It never does. Until it does. She rose abruptly. I'm not going to let this... She threw a folder onto the table, pages spilling out. Here. Actual evidence that Laureen embezzled tech hours and diverted client work to a private server? The room flinched. Someone gasped. I took a breath, then calmly picked up the papers, flipped through them once, twice. Timestamps are wrong, I said, looking up. These logs were edited 2 weeks ago by your login, Blair. The projector screen changed. I opened a secured dev log mirror, one not scrubbed, one I had backed up long before I left. There it was, my original metadata, signatures, every line of code tethered to me. Then came the kill shot. I pulled out a sealed envelope. This is my approved patent license, filed 4 months ago, signed and dated by the U.S. Patent Office. My name, not yours, not Rhett's, mine. Silence exploded louder than any scream. Blair's hands trembled, knuckles white against the table edge. I turned to the board. You wanted to clean house, maybe start with the ones feeding secrets through their pillows. No one spoke. I closed my laptop slowly, like sealing a tomb. As I turned to leave, the door handle cold in my grip, a voice called out. Ms. Vaughn. A junior board member stood. Don't go far. I didn't turn. I just smiled, tight, controlled, and walked out. They built the trap. I handed them the spring. Lucian stood at my kitchen counter, coffee in hand, watching me lace my boots like I was suiting up for war. You don't have to do this, he said softly. I do, I replied, zipping my coat. They didn't leave me another way. The sun hadn't even risen. The city still slept. But inside I was wide awake, too awake. Calm, like the eye of a hurricane that had waited long enough. 16 years ago, I missed my son's school play to fix a server outage in Malaysia. No one thanked me. Last year, I took a red-eye to save a merger Blair nearly botched. She took the credit. Today, I stopped letting people rewrite my story. I stepped into Dalka HQ like it was my last breath, and I planned to hold it until the dust settled. The boardroom buzzed with low conversation. That stopped the moment I entered. I'll keep it brief, I said, placing a folder on the center table. This is a choice, Blair or me. They exchanged glances. Some looked intrigued, others uncomfortable. I have documents proving IP manipulation, data theft, and internal fraud. I have testimony from 3 stakeholders who witnessed it. I turned to Blair, who sat upright, tight-lipped. If you keep her, I walk, and everything I own walks with me. The platform, the clients, the legal rights, all of it. Blair laughed, dry and too loud. She's bluffing. It's desperation. I smiled faintly. I never bluffed twice. A tremor went through the room. One board member cleared his throat. We should take a vote. But before he could finish, the monitor behind me flickered on. A video file began to play. Time-stamped footage of Rhett and Blair in a private office, huddled over spreadsheets and whispering names. My name. Lucian's. Two others. Rhett's voice came through clearly. If we spin the financials this way, we can discredit her leverage. The room froze. Someone cursed under their breath. Lucian, seated in the back, didn't flinch. He simply nodded once in my direction. Rhett turned pale. This is taken out of context. Enough! One board member snapped. Effective immediately, Blair and Rhett are suspended pending internal investigation. Blair stood abruptly. You're all being manipulated. No, I said quietly. They finally stopped being. The rest was a blur. Voices rose and fell. Legal counsel huddled in corners. I gathered my things slowly, methodically, as if brushing dust off an old trophy. I didn't wait for applause. Outside, the morning sky had finally cracked open. Light spilled over the buildings like a verdict. My phone buzzed. A message from the board liaison. They want you back, in full. I stared at it for a moment. My reply was one line. I'm not done yet. I looked up, catching my reflection in the car window. No longer erased, no longer replaceable. They wanted a war. I gave them terms. They chose fire. 2 weeks after the fallout, my apartment was finally quiet again. But not in the same way. The kind of quiet that settles after a long storm. Furniture undisturbed, curtains half drawn. The espresso machine whirring like a heartbeat trying to remember its rhythm. Emails stacked high. Headlines trailed behind my name like torn ribbon. Dalka shakeup. Visionary or vindicator? I didn't click. They offered me the title. Full control. Corner office. A ceremonial chair that once held Blair's hollow legacy. I declined. Not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood power doesn't mean owning the room. It means knowing when to leave it. I didn't come here to replace a tyrant, I told them in the private meeting. I came to burn the system that made her. They blinked, nodded. Some looked relieved. Lucian sat across from me, silent, steady. I handed him the keys, metaphorically and literally. You lead, I said, the right way. The board voted unanimously. Interim CEO, Lucian Vance. Advisory board seat, Lorene Vaughn. Unanimous again. There was no champagne, just clarity and silence. A week later, I drove across state lines, chasing something I'd buried deeper than any server file. A beige house in the dust fields of Arizona. One porch light flickering like it resented being left on. The door opened before I knocked. She stood there. My mother. Lines deeper than I remembered, or maybe just more visible in daylight. Her eyes traveled across my face like she was trying to guess how much of her still lived in me. Wasn't sure you'd actually show, she said. Me neither. We didn't hug, just sat, talked. Not about the lawsuits, not about Dalka, just history. 16 years ago, I left and didn't look back. She'd called me selfish, cold, ambitious in ways she couldn't define without flinching. Now she looked at me with something between regret and awe. You became everything I feared, she finally said. And everything I failed to be. I didn't say thank you, or I forgive you. Some things weren't meant to be folded into neat closure, but I listened, and that was enough. On the way back, the road felt lighter somehow, like something inside me had finally stopped trying to explain itself. San Diego greeted me with warm air and ocean glare. That evening, I sat in a middle row at my daughter's school recital. She didn't know I'd made it. Her eyes scanned the crowd, found me. She smiled. It wasn't wide, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. As the lights dimmed and the final song played, my phone buzzed. New number. One line. We'd like to discuss a fresh venture. You set the terms. I locked the screen, looked out the auditorium's back window at the skyline I no longer feared, and whispered to myself, This time, I write the contract. Not with blood or fire, just truth. Sometimes winning isn't about the titles we take, it's about the peace we reclaim. I thought justice would taste sweet, but in truth, it's quiet, measured, earned one decision at a time. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Your worth is never defined by those who try to erase you. You define you. And when the world says you're finished, start writing the next chapter anyway. What about you? Have you ever walked away from something that no longer served your peace? Or had to rebuild from a betrayal you didn't see coming? I'd love to hear your story. If this video spoke to your heart, leave a comment with a 1, or tell me what city you're watching from. And if it didn't, let me know why. I want to understand your story too. And hey, if you're still here, it means something clicked. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button to follow more stories that move, challenge, and maybe even heal. See you in the next one.